Well, good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Jim Brett here at the New England Council, and so pleased that you could join us for today's program. While we are thrilled to have resumed our in-person programming, we know that many of you have enjoyed being able to access council programs virtually. And so we will continue to offer some of our programming, including our Inside the Corner Office series virtually. But I did want to take a moment to remind you of some of the events we have planned in the next couple of weeks. On April 13th, we're looking forward hosting our annual breakfast with the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Maura Healey. And it'll be hosted by Putnam Investments. Also in April, we'll be hosting Capitol Hill Report breakfast with Senator Jack Reed in Providence and Congressman John Larson in Hartford, and a Capitol Conversation breakfast in Washington with Senator Ed Markey. And of course, we hope you'll join us for our Washington Leaders Conference back after a 2-year hiatus on May 11th and 12th in Washington. Registration is open and sponsorship opportunities are available. But today we're delighted to be hosting another installment of our Inside the Corner Office, which we launched last fall. Our guest is the president and the director of Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, Dr. Peter deMenocal. Woods Hole is a private nonprofit research and higher education facility dedicated to the study of marine science and engineering. It was established in 1930. It's the largest independent oceanographic research institution in the United States. Dr. Peter deMenocal joined Woods Hole in October 2020 after spending much of his career at Columbia University. He's a marine geologist and whose research uses deep sea ocean sediments to learn how and why the Earth's ocean and climate have changed in the past in order to predict how they may change in the future. Needless to say, we're pleased that he could join us today to tell us a little more about his career and the wonderful work that is being conducted at Woods Hole. Dr. Peter deMenocal, we welcome you.
Jim, thank you so much for having me. Emily, thank you as well for reaching out. And it's a real honor to be here with you and to be here with your membership. Thank you so much.
You know, looking at your background, I was just fascinated how you dedicated your life to studying our oceans, but I'm curious more so what sparked your interest and passion for the oceans.
Right. So I grew up alongside the ocean. I grew up in Rye, New York, but more importantly, I was the son of a father who loved the ocean and actually had spent much of his time retired by the ocean as well. But actually, that wasn't it so much as I was in college. Rather, I was a studio art and math major, and my father kind of looked at me and shook his head and said, "You know, I don't know how you're going to make this work." And then I had a chance encounter actually at the Woods Hole Oceanographic at 19 years old. I was actually attending St. Lawrence University in upstate New York. And I did what any 19-year-old did in those days, which is I set out on the road hitchhiking to visit a friend on the Cape. And my last ride happened to drop me off in front of the Woods Hole Oceanographic. And as you would show up in those days, there were these signs saying no trespassing, because this is where we were doing a lot of Navy work, a lot of classified Navy work. And of course, that just beckoned me in. And I went into one of the laboratories there, and this big hand comes on my shoulder and said, "Son, can I help you?" And I thought it was a security guard. And he wheels me into his office. Turns out he was the dean of graduate studies, Charlie Hollister, was this famed marine geologist. In fact, he's my academic grandfather. And he just spun this tale of what it's like to be a researcher, to live the life of an oceanographer. And it was so compelling to me at that moment in time, almost 35 years ago to the day almost. And it was so compelling that that's what I wanted to do. And that's what I did. That day, I became an oceanographer.
Now, you're a native New Yorker and you spent much of your career at Columbia. How has Columbia prepared you for your position here? And more importantly, needless a softball question, how are you enjoying being in Woods Hole?
Right. Well, I'll answer the first question, last question first, which is
Yeah.
that's the first question I get is, I spent 33 years living pretty much in the same zip code of the Upper West Side in Manhattan. And, I love my time there. And lived in an apartment the whole time. My girls, I've got twin girls who are now 15. They only knew a small 2-bedroom apartment. So they shared a very small room together for a while. So when we moved here actually to Woods Hole, it was magnificent. I mean, it's a beautiful place to live, and the community is amazing. The Oceanographic is incredibly welcoming. So we're loving the move. But really what prepared me to take on this position of leading the Oceanographic now as their 11th president and director in their almost 92-year history. The reason I made the transition is that I'm a climate scientist, I'm a marine geologist, but I've been working for the last decade or so on this problem of how can we really bring out the most creative solutions to not only the climate challenge, but the larger ecosystem and ocean challenges that face humanity. How can we mobilize this incredible brain trust, this talent, to really solve the kinds of problems we have to solve on the urgent timeframes that we have to? And I ran a center at Columbia that looked at this very problem, and really I found a secret sauce, if you will, of a way to pursue it. And that really just emboldened me to take this to the next level. And so when I was contacted to consider this position, I immediately thought, there's no more capable institution in the world, indeed, to do this work. And the reason is because of this incredible mix of really exceptionally talented scientists, exceptionally talented technicians and engineers. And then we have these global class research vessels where we can deploy these experiments, deploy these ideas. So we can do everything from soup to nuts. And that nimbleness is really unique in the world, indeed.
Speaking of the vessels, have you been out on them, and how often do you go out on them?
So, funnily enough, so I do go out on oceanographic ships a lot, not so much nowadays. I've got a day job, but I do go out on ships. And what's interesting is we take sediment cores from the world's oceans. The work that I do is mainly in the far North Atlantic, north of Iceland, and then off of both coasts of Africa. And all of my coring cruises, with the exception of one, have been on Woods Hole oceanographic ships, even though I wasn't here at the Oceanographic. And the reason for that is because we are this leading institution for oceanography. And so the Oceanographic would really lead all the instrument deployment and the technicians capable of leading a lot of the research. So I've been on many of the oceanographic vessels.
A few questions from a few of our members. Certainly one of the most pressing issues we face, not just as a nation, but as a planet, is climate change, which of course has a tremendous impact on the ocean. You recently penned an op-ed in The Hill calling for urgent action to address the devastating impact on the oceans. How does the research that is conducted at Woods Hole play a role in efforts to combat global climate change?
Right. So you actually touched on one of the very reasons that drew me to the Oceanographic. It's not only the talented people who are here, but there's also this real sense of mission here. And so in the first 6 months when I arrived, we developed a vision for the institution with all of the staff. And the essence of that result, or the result of that work, has been something that we call Vision 2030, which is our decadal plan of action looking forward. And one of the big focus areas of that Vision 2030 plan is climate action. And so here at the Oceanographic, we are leading a number of research initiatives that are looking at how we can accelerate the science and the technology and the solutions, indeed, on the accelerated time frame that we need to address climate adaptation. So that is, how can we be more resilient to the changes that are happening now in our lifetimes and in our children's lifetimes? And then how can we mitigate, how can we offset or reduce some of the risks that are in the pipeline? And it won't be a surprise to anyone on this call, but the oceans represent are 2/3 of the planet's surface. And everything that you think about that matters to you as a human has its origins in the oceans. Every drop of rainfall comes from the oceans. The presence of heat waves or storms or extreme weather events have their roots in the oceans. The ocean takes up 1/3 of every unit of carbon we introduce into the atmosphere. 90% of the heat goes into the ocean. I can go on, but the oceans are central to the climate solutions. And so what we're doing here, and we can talk about this more perhaps later on, is really finding out what are our big bet opportunities? What are the really big grand challenges that we as an Oceanographic can uniquely lead, but really lead in terms of a partnership. And this is why we wrote this op-ed with Margaret Linen, the director of Scripps, the other large oceanographic institution in the United States, is I wanted to send a message not only to the nation, but indeed to the world that we are here. We've got these amazing scientists, technicians, engineers who are very capable and ready to get to work on this problem. It's really a moonshot.
Now, the Build Back Better bill did not pass Congress, but there was some language in there on climate change. Did you like the language? Did you wish there was more addressed to that area? Your thoughts?
What I really admired about the Build Back Better language was its courage. And I have to actually pause on that word, because that's actually the core mantra of our Vision 2030 plan, which is the challenges that await this generation and future generations requires a level of not only intellectual, but full-on material courage for all of us, regardless of what we do, to bring our best talents to bear on these challenges ahead. So what I really liked about that bill was the courage that it displayed, and frankly, the realism, speaking as a climate scientist, of what's required, because it is a full-on transformation of the global economy. And the positive message in this, there's a tremendous amount of money to be made in that transition. As with every industrial revolution, there will be winners and losers, but the ones who are on the right side of history of this are going to find themselves in a very good place.
As you know, the New England region is home to a thriving blue economy. Can you tell us a little bit about the role that you see Woods Hole playing in supporting growth and innovation in the blue economy?
Thanks, Jim. I mean, as you know, New England is the global center of excellence for the blue economy and science and technology. I mean, there's so much that our state representations in this are leading in the blue economy. Almost none more so than Massachusetts. There's a tremendous amount of activity in this. I mean, at the Oceanographic alone, we have about a $270 million per year budget. It's about 85% federally funded. We're the #1 recipient of ocean science funding, #2 in earth science. It's about a little over $500 million in business revenue, supporting thousands of jobs. But more importantly, when we start thinking about what's required to make progress on the climate challenge, for example, or the fisheries challenges, or some of these other correlated risks that are attached to this, there is a business angle to every aspect of this. So, for example, in the offshore wind domain, we have a very large research group here that's looking at how we can make best use of our wind resources while still balancing the needs of other industries as well. And we're also, I think we'll have a chance to talk about this later on, but one of the biggest areas we're working on right now is looking into the ocean's potential for carbon dioxide removal, which is indeed vast.
Much of Woods Hole's work is focused on monitoring the world's oceans, which is, needless to say, no small task when we're talking about, as you just mentioned earlier, 2/3 of the Earth's surface. Can you just talk about the role 5G and other technologies in making that work easier and hopefully less costly?
Right. So on the 5G domain, the real opportunity for us is, as you probably can imagine, The Woods Hole Oceanographic leads these really large global networks of observing stations. So these are moorings out in the middle of the oceans, really around the world, that are monitoring various properties of the ocean, the warming of the ocean, the salinity, the strength of the currents, the productivity of the waters. And these are tremendous data engines, as you can imagine. They're out there. There are these sentinels in the oceans that are measuring these properties continuously. And so the data throughput is a real concern. And so we've been working to develop a 5G enabled buoy that allows for very high data transfer rates. This is actually something that we're just starting in a discussion now, actually with a MITRE corporation here in Massachusetts. I'm very pleased to say we've had very productive conversations with MITRE about ways in which we can collaborate. Doug Robbins and his team there have just been fantastic. And so really this use of 5G, I think really is a potential revolution indeed for the ocean sciences, because I'll be talking about this, I think, in a moment, but we're conceiving of what's called the Ocean Vital Signs Network, which is just this tremendous data cube in the ocean that can monitor ocean health, the ocean's uptake of carbon. And so this is really a tremendous, not only an instrument problem, but a data problem that can be solved by 5G.
You know, you mentioned MITRE. MITRE is a member of the New England Council, another great company, and we're fortunate to have them. So you have the Analog, you have MITRE. What about the relationship with the military?
Right. So the Oceanographic has had a long-standing relationship with the Navy, as one can imagine. Really, our relationship goes back to the formation of the Oceanographic, and the Navy is responsible really for our leadership in marine operations, but we do quite a bit of work supporting battlefield readiness, naval readiness, and as everyone in this call can imagine, as the planet is changing, so too are the oceans. And that means so too is the battle space of the oceans. That is, the propagation of sound through the water column is changing literally month by month as the ocean temperatures and salinity are changing as climate changes. And that really changes the battlefield readiness. And so we're very active in that as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of things I perhaps can't talk about, but we have a very strong relationship with the Navy, and in particularly helping to really protect and preserve the naval forces with the United States.
And just on your budget, how much do you rely on federal grants and other assistance from the federal?
So our total research budget is just over $250 million, and about 85% of that comes from federal sources. But it's really across the divisions. It's the National Science Foundation, it's the Department of Energy, it's NOAA. There are a lot of different divisions across so we're diverse within the federal portfolio. It's my goal and my leadership here to diversify that portfolio. And so one of the really highlights of my early time here at the Oceanographic has been this partnership with Analog Devices. And Vincent Roche, their CEO, and Dan Liebholz and I met a little over a year ago to discuss ways in which we could bring industry and our research environment together to really advance the sustainability missions that we share. And we found this really tremendous overlap in our missions of what we wanted to do to help accelerate progress on climate, for example. And thus was born the Ocean Climate Innovation Accelerator, OCIA. And so Analog was very courageous in stepping up to this challenge. And the idea is that they are the first partner of what we hope will be perhaps a dozen industry partners joining this acceleration engine. And essentially it's a DARPA-like entity that allows us to invest in high risk, but really high impact ideas and technology to accelerate them so that they can be developed, tested, and then hopefully brought out to market. So again, this gets back to your blue economy idea.
In addition to the research vessels that you use to conduct research, there's a lot of shoreside infrastructure needed to support the work that you do at Woods Hole. And I understand there's a work underway right now to upgrade some of the dock facilities. Can you just tell us a little more about, one, the upgrades, and then what kind of funding was necessary to support that work?
Right. So one of the first things that was brought to my attention when I signed the contract to come here was our need to build a new dock facility. And that's the last time I'm going to use that word, because what we've conceived of for this space. So this is a 2-acre facility that supports our 2 global class research ships. We have 80 feet of water, right about 100 feet from my house here. And that really allows us this immediate open access to the oceans. And so we are conceiving of this complex. So to the extent you can envision some kind of a smaller functionality of a dock, this is not that. This is a complex for ocean exploration and research that would consist of autonomous vehicle launching stations, places to house our submersibles and develop new autonomous vehicles, new electronic shops, this 5G that we're just talking about, labs to build up these communication tools. So really, it's a Kennedy Space Center for the oceans.
In addition to research, I don't think many people are aware, Woods Hole is also an educational institution, awarding postgraduate degrees in partnership with MIT. And I know the Institute is also engaged in K through 12 STEM outreach. What advice would you give to a young person who is interested in the ocean, as you were as a young boy, and interested in pursuing a career studying the ocean?
Right. So I can actually speak from some experience based on the story I started with. The oceans are one of the hardest problems that you can pursue as an academic area of research. It's also the most fascinating, and it's also the most relevant. And so, what I would tell students when I was an educator at Columbia University, and what I tell people now if I have the opportunity, is that the challenges that await this generation and future generations are so wide-reaching and so profound that we really need the best minds out there. And the Oceanographic, we have our PhD program called the Joint Program with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. We've graduated over 1,000 PhD scientists. And these students that are coming through, these postdocs, these young careers, are increasingly diverse, both in gender and in racial diversity. And really, the oceans are this great sort of unifier of talent. I'll just wrap with one story. I have actually a number of friends of mine who were recovering string theorists. These were physicists who initially were working on string theory, which is this origins of the universe kind of question. And they both said they had quit their careers in string theory and got into ocean and climate research because it was harder. It was a much more interesting set of questions that were being asked in the fluids and the transports of the oceans.
I mentioned earlier about funding, but I realized that as the 5th recipient of the National Science Foundation funding in the country, you obviously have to be very pleased with the FY 2022 omnibus spending bill that was just passed a few weeks ago, that included the largest increase to the National Science Foundation in, I think, 12 years. You touched on it, but you might want to expand. How critical is NSF and other federal funding to the work that you do?
So it's absolutely critical. Let's be absolutely clear on that. One of the things that's important for those who are watching this right now to appreciate, the United States has the best science funding program in the world, bar none. what makes it so robust is not just the level of funding that the US places on research, but how those funds are deployed. It's among the most rigorous and merit-based award systems that exists anywhere in the world. And so the way these funds are deployed to go after these really hard science questions is very efficient. Unfortunately, over the last several decades, the funding for basic research, like in ocean science, has been declining. And so this investment in the sciences is essential, not just because it's what I do or what the Oceanographic does, but this gets to the core of what makes America so strong. That is, we have incredible centers of research, such as the Oceanographic or MIT or some of these other institutions. But it's, that's really fueled by this federal commitment to research. And so for us to maintain a competitive edge, not only within this country, but really on the international stage, particularly with really outsized investments that are happening in China and in Europe, for us to stay ahead and be competitive, we have to invest not only at the level that you just spoke about, but really at a level much higher than that. And as you know, as well as anybody, that kind of investment in research turns into companies, turns into profit for America.
Right. The New England Council has been closely monitoring efforts on Capitol Hill to advance the major legislation to promote the U.S. competitiveness and innovation, namely the USICA bill that passed the Senate last year, and America Competes, which passed the House earlier this year. The legislation, as you know, would establish a new directive for technology innovation partnerships within NSF. Can you just talk about how this proposed new directive would support the work of institutions like Woods Hole?
Sure. So the TIP program, this Technology Innovation Program, is really focusing on this idea of advancing not only basic research, but also applied research, what we call use-inspired research. And so the way that NSF Director Ponch is his name, Ponch Panchanathan, describes it, it's this interwoven helix of basic and applied research that accelerate the kinds of solutions that we need in both technology and in advances in basic research. And so getting back to our Vision 2030 plan for the Oceanographic, interestingly enough, after we had developed this vision plan, I had a phone call with the NSF Director, Ponch Panchanathan, and we had an opportunity to present the vision plan to him. He said, "Peter, that's exactly where we're taking the country right now in terms of this focus on federal funding." And it's good news for America's businesses as well, right? Because it's really advancing science to inform solutions, which then go out to market.
Mm-hmm. If you could point one or two things that you would love to be able to leave with the members of the New England Council that they may not be aware of, what would the one or two things be?
I think the number one thing I would say is that I'm very optimistic about our ability to lead the knowledge creation to solve the problems that are facing the world right now. There's so much potential in not only what's happening here at the Oceanographic, but across the nation. But really what we need is this call for courage, this call for really applying our efforts, working as partners. So for example, this Ocean Climate Innovation Accelerator, that's a partnership between our institution and Analog Devices and perhaps other companies. That kind of coming together and working towards some common goals, this is really a new way of looking at how we can work together to advance these solutions. And I suppose the overarching thing I would leave us with is that we very much have the capability to address these challenges. One should never think in kind of a hopeless context that it's all too big or it's all too out of our hands. It's not. It's something that we can get on top of, but it requires a level of commitment that really we haven't seen. And this is honestly what brought me to the Oceanographic. Is I gave up tenure to come here. And so I'm betting with my own career and my own life that this is going to happen. and we're going to try to make it happen.
Now, you were the Dean of Science at Columbia?
That's correct. Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
Yep. I was in charge of the 9 science departments, and I say in charge in quotes because one's never in charge of 250 tenured scientists at Columbia.
Right. And if Washington was watching our program today and they reached out to say, hey, what you guys are doing is just wonderful news. What else can we do for you? What would be the wish list?
I mean, the number one wish list is to continue this increase in investment in the basic sciences. We have very real needs for educating and bringing on the next generation of scientists to get to work on these problems. One of the, I think, greatest opportunities that I'm seeing is actually this TIP program that we just talked about, which is advancing basic research and connecting that to use-inspired research, which then goes on to benefit the private sector. And I think this is truly one of the turbocharging events, or one of the, I think we'll look back on as one of the hallmark events of growth in this country, where we're investing in our next generation, we're investing in our great institutions, and doing so with purpose.
And what would you like from us, the business community of New England Council?
Well, first of all, I thank you all for your attention. Jim, I thank you for this opportunity to speak to your membership. The number one thing that I could use is we're building these partnerships, we're building these relationships with the private sector. It's my opinion that a fundamental role of the Oceanographic is not only to lead this core research, that basic research, but also to develop this use-inspired research that's of interest to the private sector. And so for the Ocean Climate Innovation Accelerator, for example, for those of you who want to join in on this partnership, we have a very easy way to join in. It's we lead research that you would follow and participate in. So I would really like to bring on more partnerships.
Well, you have 2 great members, MITRE and Analog. I can't say enough about them. That's probably what makes New England unique, is the outstanding members that we have that have chosen New England to make their business known here and to expand. And that's what makes this area such an innovative area, to say the least. But we're grateful that they've joined that partnership with you. I found this period very informative. I learned something about Woods Hole. I hope our viewers also learned an awful lot, but it's one of the gems of New England is the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. And obviously you came in at a very interesting time, to say the least. And obviously you hit the ground running. You got a vision that National Science Foundation says you're right on, you're nailing it. We love what you're doing. So obviously you're having great success there, but we want to thank you for taking time today, but not only that, being a member of the New England Council. And we look forward maybe even visiting you. Maybe we, the New England Council, should have some type of a forum down in your institute. That would be something to look forward to.
I was going to close on that myself, is that one of the things I'd love to do is to offer you to come on down.
Excellent. Well, again, I just want to thank you, Dr. Peter deMenocal. And we have one of these programs just about every month. Next month, we're going to have the CEO of Procter & Gamble. And we look forward to having you tune in for that. But in the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy, and thanks for watching today's program. Thank you.
Great, Jim, and thank you so much. And thank you for all you do.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Great, thank you.